everybody. My name is Jasmijn Bol. I am a professor at Tulane University. I'm originally from the Netherlands, but now in the US. And today I'm going to talk about my research project, Cultural Controls in Audit Firms. Let me first introduce you to the research team. So besides me, there is Mark Peecher, who is professor at the University of Illinois, Isabella Grabner, who's at Vienna University, and Katlijn Haesebrouck, who's at Maastricht University. So in our research, what we examine is how can cultural controls improve audit quality? So we set out to investigate this. So let me explain to you why this question is so important. As you all know, there's an incentive conflict between the auditors, the client management, and society at large. And this makes it really hard to work with explicit incentives like bonus contracts. As you know, you don't get a bonus for finishing an audit successfully. So audit firms have been interested in what we often think of these soft cultural controls. And this is a good avenue of research because research outside of auditing has really shown that cultural controls can lead to positive outcomes, increased performance, customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction. So there's a lot to learn. So when we started this project, we really wanted to make sure that we had some good practical guidance to not just stop at saying, hey, build a strong culture that promotes audit quality, but to really give you very concrete advice on what to do. And we were successful. So let me present this to you. First, let me talk about the research design. So how did we come to our conclusions? So as you know, there's often an incentive conflict where there's the top management who wants employees to act a certain way, and without any interference, that doesn't necessarily happen. But when management control systems are introduced, they help direct and motivate employees to take the actions that the organization wants. Cultural controls are part of that management control system. So they're a mechanism to direct and motivate employees. The way it works is that it cultivates a workforce whose values are closely aligned with those of the organization. So because they personally want to act a certain way, they will make the choices, they will prioritize the actions that are consistent with the organizational values. We also know from prior literature that two very effective cultural controls are socialization and selection. So through socialization, through socializing the employees into internalizing the organizational values, and by selecting employees who have close personal values, you have employees who internalize the values of the organization and therefore act and prioritize those values that are important to the organization. So this is what we know from prior literature. As I said, there has been lots of evidence that strong organizational cultures can work. So what we do in our study is we look at audit firms and we look at the internalization of audit quality. So how do we get employees to internalize the value of audit quality so that the actions that they take are those that prioritize audit quality? And we again look at socialization and selection because those are mechanisms that prior literature has shown to be very effective. So what are exactly those cultural elements that you should focus on in socialization? And what are those personal values that you should focus on in selection? right? So we go a step beyond just saying you need a strong culture that highlights audit quality. We are really looking at what are the things that you should socialize on or select on. So that brings us to the implications. As I said, how do we socialize so that we have an internalization of audit quality as a core value? Our research shows that you need to focus on supportive leadership. That means an audit voice culture in which you have open communication, people are being tolerant of mistakes, and there's an appreciation for learning. We show that when these elements are present in the culture, when auditors perceive there is an audit voice culture, that there is stronger internalization of audit quality as a core value. Another part of supportive leadership is resource facilitation. It is important that there is enough time in the budget to allow for action-oriented skepticism. That means that the auditors will be skeptic and follow up with the appropriate actions, but only if there are risk indicators that warrant that behavior. So those are two key elements that should be highlighted when there is socialization. This will result in auditors that internalize the audit quality as core value. And then there's selection. So when you hire, but also retain and promote auditors, you want to be cognizant of two important personal values. Auditors that care about societal interest, right? So when they say contributing to society is very important to me. And auditors that are truth seekers, that really like to get to the bottom of things and that cannot stand when they're not really sure about something. Those personal values are closely aligned to the core value of audit quality. So when people have this personal value, it will be easier for them to internalize audit quality as a core value. So by hiring, retaining, and promoting these auditors, there will be more value alignment. Another very interesting finding of our research is emphasizing audit quality as a core value in communication. We're very interested in this because this was a theme that really came up a lot during our interviews. On the one hand, we expected talking about audit quality in firm communication to be a good thing because it enhances understanding, right? It tells employees, this is a value, this is what we're doing, which can lead to increased internalization of audit quality as a core value. But there's also something that is called symbolic decoupling. That is when the auditors perceive that what the company is claiming isn't really the actual practice, right? So there's a decoupling of what they say they're about and the actual practice of things. And something that is really critical here is rhetorical oversimplification. This is a process where leaders don't really talk about the hard trade-offs that need to be made, the hard choices involved in achieving the organization's objectives. And in our interviews, we also definitely found some evidence of that, where people were talking about audit quality as a value that they felt was commercial and focused on the outside and not necessarily something that they perceived as a true value of the organization. So we studied this through our survey to get empirical evidence, and we indeed found a negative association with the internalization of audit quality as a core value. So what does this mean? It means that as an audit firm, you want to be careful that if you talk a lot about audit quality, about how important it is to your organization, But you don't acknowledge that this isn't something simple, right? That there are often hard trade-offs that need to be made, that providing good customer service and doing the best audit that's out there sometimes can be at odds with each other. So it is important that when you talk about this as firm leadership, that you take that into consideration and you don't oversimplify the pursuit of audit quality. So the next thing I want to talk about is, how did we conclude this? How did we come to empirical evidence for our findings? Well, we did this by capturing the internalization of audit quality as a core value. So we wanted a measure of how much people had internalized the value of audit quality. We did this through measuring what we call action-oriented skepticism. We asked all of our audits in our study to answer 4 questions. 1, pushing back. Do you push back to clients, supervisors, colleagues? Do you follow up with the client when appropriate? Are you vigilant about things that are in the gray zone? And do you get expert help if necessary? And so interesting, when we asked all of our others these questions, we really found a nice variation. Not everybody feels that they are an action-oriented skeptic. Some are very low, some are very high, and most are in the middle. So there's definitely variation. And so this is a measure of how people perceive themselves. Next step, we used our measure of action-oriented skepticism to see if this is a good proxy for internalization of audit quality. So how did we do this? Well, you've heard me talk before about the cultural control, socialization, and selection leading to internalization of audit quality. This is important because it's that internalization that again leads to high audit quality, because people who have internalized the value will prioritize a high quality audit process in the actions and the judgments. And so our action-oriented skepticism is a proxy, right, an imperfect measure for the internalization of audit quality. And so because it's a proxy, if it's a good proxy, it should have the same effect. So like the internalization of audit quality, it should result in a high quality audit process. And so we run an experiment to validate our measure. We randomly assigned auditors in our study in 2 hypothetical audits, and one included and one excluded a seeded sign of material misstatement. Our hypothesis was that those that were high on the action-oriented skepticism, right, strong, that they would indeed judge and act more skeptical, but only when the seeded sign of material misstatement was present. And that was indeed what we found. Action-oriented skepticism reliably predicts decision-making that fosters a high-quality audit process. And this again indicates the internalization of audit quality as a core value. So we show that those auditors that are action-oriented skeptics, that they have a higher quality audit process. And we, in our study, look at variables that I talked about, the cultural elements, the personal values that lead to auditors with higher action-oriented skepticism. In order to do this study, we collected a lot of data. We did 34 interviews with 3 audit firms, 3 partners, 16 seniors, 14 juniors, and 1 HR manager. We conducted an experiment and a survey. We had 409 participants in total from 5 audit firms. And I want to take this opportunity to thank everybody who participated in our study. I hope that these insights that we were able to gain from our study are helpful and help you to build a strong culture where people internalize the audit quality as the core value. Thank you again.